Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rick Larkin, District Commissioner in the Old Ephraim District, which is the northernmost district in the crossroads of the West Council, the north end of Utah, just south of Idaho. I'm excited to be here, and I'm your instructor today for BCS 112. So recruiting of commissioners is ongoing. An ongoing need today. Right now, I'm running into this same thing. We're coming up to another year, the crossroads of the West Council. The district and council level positions run June 1st through May 31st for the charter year, whereas the units run January 1st through December. So I'm coming to a point where we're going around and confirming with commissioners if they're willing to serve for another year, and I've already had 3 tell me they're going to drop. And so I'm going to have to backfill them and find other people. There's other positions that are always coming open throughout the year. So it's just an ongoing thing that we have to deal with as commissioners, is to find new people to serve. And particularly in this course, we're going to talk about unit commissioners and how to identify them and the recruiting of them. So in our learning objectives, if I can go select that course over here. So at the end of this course, we plan to have a way and mechanism, or more than one, to help identify and recruit candidates for unit service. We're going to learn about the 5 P's of recruiting and understand those methods for recruiting the commissioners. Let's talk for a minute the role of the district commissioner. And this is really all of the administrative commissioners. That's your district commissioner, your assistant district commissioners can help, the council commissioners, but the administrative commissioners are really, one of their focuses is on recruiting. It's our responsibility to do so with support of unit commissioners. We identify and recruit enough of the right people so that units in the district can receive regular helpful service. Our role as a district commissioner in particular is we take a lead on that, to finding these people and make sure that our units have the help that they need to be successful. So how do we do that? Finding the right person. That is the question that's always on my mind. Not only who is willing to serve, but we need to go further and say, who's the best person to serve with a unit? And in order to do that, we need to evaluate the unit. There isn't a one-size-fit-all. In the screen, we've got the it's a cookie cutter, and in this case, a puzzle piece, and we just we can't take an individual, ask them to be a commissioner, and expect them to be able to fit in the same way with every single unit. Each unit has unique needs. Each unit has unique resources and capabilities, and we'll be most successful if we work to find people who will match with those units and with those unit leaders. So while we can have a job description or a thing that unit commissioners, a list of basic expectations for unit commissioners, we have to look deeper and really look for those people who are going to help for those units. So the question is, how do we find the right person? Well, I think we had a good talk at the start. The initial course was the servant's heart, and I think that's the first requirement. A person who is willing to serve but maybe doesn't have all the knowledge is far preferable to someone who has a lot of knowledge but who isn't willing to serve. There's all kinds of training available where we can teach a new commissioner who's willing to serve how to be a commissioner, about Scouts, BSA, or Cub Scouts, or Sea Scouts, or any of the other things they need to know. There's district commissioners, assistant district commissioners, and many others who can help guide an individual but the most important thing is that they have a servant's heart. So, and why is that? Is all commissioners are leaders, but great commissioners are servant leaders. And we talked about that quite a bit in the last course that we had. So I'm not going to beat on that a whole lot more, but that's the very first thing that we need is someone who is willing to serve and help with the units. Talk about the 5 P's of recruitment. So as we've talked before, I mentioned in my experience, there's no one who, at least that I am aware of, there is no district in all of the BSA that is not in need of more commissioners. And since we need to be doing that year round, we need to be constantly looking for more candidates. And then once we find candidates or identify them, then we need to look at what's next. How do we recruit them? How do we engage them and get them to say yes, ideally, and get them to help us with our commissioner mission? So the first thing is preparation. We have to prepare to ask. We're going to talk in more detail about what each of these steps mean, so I'm not going to explain in great detail right here on this slide. We need to prepare. We're looking for someone that has passion, and we'll dig into that. I almost was going to start talking about passion in some of these steps. We'll talk about it in a minute and what that means. Passion individual needs to be passionate and have passion for scouting, or at the very least passion to help others. Potential. There's people who maybe they have passion, but they just don't have the time or the potential, the ability to help out at this time. Priorities, what is the individual's priorities? What are the unit's priorities? And that's important to keep in mind. And then finally, and I really like this one, poaching, as in no poaching. Yeah, we've heard the term that someone can rob Peter to pay Paul, but that leaves Peter poorer. And so we don't want to poach individuals. So let's talk for a minute. So what are you, Vernon and the others, Wendell, Joe, David, feel free to chime in. So what are some things that you think we need to think about before beginning to recruit an individual? Talking about that preparation step. What are some things we need to keep in mind or to consider?
Probably assess our needs right now.
Yeah. One of the key tools that we don't use very often is our, I can't think what they're called, but anyways, one is the detailed assessment. That asks each commissioner to make a recommendation of someone from the unit that could potentially be a unit commissioner.
Yep.
And the other one is the lack of our nominating committees.
Yep, that's a concern. That's definitely a concern.
That's a tool that's hurting us, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are things we've got some things that we need to put in place to help us recruit better. And to do that, I think one of the things, like Vernon mentioned, when we're looking for people to recruit, we need to know, and we need to write down and have that outlined. What are those needs, especially of the unit, if we're looking for unit commissioners? And I'm thinking about that as a district commissioner here. If I have a unit who doesn't have a commissioner, that probably means I need to go visit with the unit, or at least the key 3, to find out what their needs are.
Right.
And if we don't have that, it's hard to find somebody to help them. We've got some units that are very strong. Troop 1 here in Logan's been running for 5, 6, 7 years now. 1910, 20, I do the math here. It's 111 years. A great history of scouting, and they're going to have very different needs than Troop 2319 that's been around for a little over a year and struggling with leadership. Or we've got a girls troop who also struggling with leadership, but have different concerns and different needs for their unit. So those are the key things that we need to identify before and prepare before we can even start thinking about recruiting and identifying those candidates to help out. We need to, as we're looking, once we do that, we look around and look for people to find out, are they willing to serve? We identify those candidates. And we're going to talk in more detail later in this course about ways that we can find people. David, you mentioned a couple that we definitely could use, the nominating committees and some of those other things that sometimes aren't in place, makes our job even harder. The potential to serve, when we identify those, their priorities, and then no poaching, as I mentioned earlier. The first thing I think we need to do, as we talked about and we're preparing, is we write down those things, and we need to identify, what does it mean to be successful? In my job, we've started moving to an agile development process. So I say started, we've actually been trying to work on this for the last 4 years, and slowly moving into it. And one of the key things when you're writing user stories is, what's the definition of success? When are you done? What does that mean? And so one of the things we need to define as commissioners, and part of this whole process as we prepare, is what does that mean? What does it mean to be successful? Is it a number of visits per year, per month, or per year? Is it certain things accomplished with the unit? And we need to write that down. Reason I mention that is that's going to translate later into, we need to let the candidate know what we expect. And it's so much better if it's in writing. We can say, here's what is needed in this unit. Here's what it is to be successful. And if they have a clear vision of what it means to be successful, we too will have a more successful outcome with that. And so we've heard, we talked about passion, or we mentioned passion, and I almost delved into this, but it's been said that we've heard that if we find work that we love, we'll never work another day in our life. I don't know how, and when I was preparing this course, I remember hearing that years ago, and this brought this up again, that if it's something we love, it's not really work. It's something we love and enjoy to do, and that is passion. And so our volunteers, it was mentioned in an earlier course about the volunteers and all the stuff we put in, the time and the money and resources. We're passionate about scouting. But the truth is, if we dig in deeper, we say we're passionate about scouting, but what is it about scouting that people are passionate about? It's important to understand that as we're looking for commissioners. What is their goal? Some people, honestly, and I'm gonna use myself as an example, I'm passionate about scouting. I love scouting, the principles that are taught through the Scout Oath and Law. But my passion for camping outdoors and sleeping on the ground has waned. I'm not quite to the point of go camping at Camp Hilton, as some might say. I still love to go camping. I love being in the outdoors. But I also, I need a really good air mattress or some other kind of support to get up off the ground. I like to have a larger tent. Years ago when I was a Boy Scout, I used an old pup tent. My dad was in the Army at the time and had a pup tent, so that's what I'd take scouting. And it wasn't a big deal when I was a youth, but now, at my point in life now, that just would not work. And so some of those things change over time. And so we need to dig a little deeper than just passion for scouting. It's what are they passionate about? Are they passionate for working directly with the youth? Do they want, is it someone who really likes to be engaged in that frontline position? Are they more of a back end position, or a administrative type of position? They really want to help scouting, but really don't want to be engaged on the front line. All of those things help us understand our people better, because honestly, new commissioners will be more successful if we can match their passion with their assignment, and if that aligns with what the unit is trying to do. Now, not everyone is going to be explicitly passionate for the things that we need in the unit, but they need to align enough that they can be successful. It might take a little bit of homework to do that, but if we do our homework and our research, our candidates will be a lot more successful. Talking about potential. So we talk about, we've mentioned passion, a little bit understanding what that's about. Potential is very different. It's possible to be for someone to be passionate about something that they're not very good at. Or that and I tried to think of an example, and I guess one example could be, if I use myself again, is I love music. I love singing. I love participating in that. I love playing. In high school, I played trombone, saxophone, both tenor and alto saxophone, and had piano lessons. So I'm passionate about music, but it's been long enough now. I'm not real good at those instruments anymore. I can still sing, but so even though I'm passionate, maybe my potential is not there that to participate in maybe in a program or playing somewhere. And in scouting, kind of the same way. Someone may be passionate, but maybe their potential isn't there in one area, and maybe they have more potential in another area. So we need to identify both their passion as well as their potential. And if we thinking about this in the case of candidates we're looking to identify, then we want to ask ourselves, what is our candidate or candidates, what are they really good at? What are something they excel at? And then how does that align with the priorities or our vision of success that we had earlier? Remember at the start, we need to define, we started defining that vision and what does success mean. And now as we're looking at our candidates, it's a case of, how does that match up? Priorities for a minute. We'll talk about that. So unfortunately, we cannot always control our candidates' priorities. We may have encountered someone who is perfect, they have passion, they have potential, but they maybe have other priorities. If they just had twins that are 3 months old and they have at home and they're at home the whole time, their priorities probably aren't with scouting at the moment, even though they love scouting. Maybe they've accepted a promotion that requires a lot of travel, and they're not going to be available to help with the unit for a while. That's another problem, that maybe their priorities are different. So we want to, whenever possible, to give volunteers the opportunity to decide what they have time to do and resources to do. We need to also understand this and see if we can work with the candidate to explain, what the expectations are, what the vision of success is, and then let them decide based on their priorities as we're working with them what they're capable and able to do with reasonable expectations. That said, one of the things we also need to be cognizant of is we do have some people and volunteers who will volunteer for everything. I think we've seen that. If there's individuals who, I know, as I say that, I've got a couple of people in my district who I could ask them to serve anywhere and they would tell me yes. But as we're looking to recruit, we need to also understand that there is a limit, and as people get spread too thin, they become less and less effective. Years ago, when I was in Commissioner College going through the basic course for unit commissioners, the bachelor's course for unit commissioners, the instruction was given that I've never forgotten. They said that commissioning should be your first priority. And ideally, you shouldn't be in any other positions in scouting, so you can focus on commissioning to be an effective commissioner. And I've never forgotten that. So that's something we have to look at as we're looking for people is priorities and where else are they serving. And that leads into also the final one in the center of our graph here, or the center of our slide, about poaching. And honestly, basically, it boils down to don't do it. Even if we found the perfect candidate, that their passion and their potential and priorities all align with our vision for success, we should not make the ask of that individual until we do a little bit more homework. We need to find out if that person's already doing a great job in scouting for someone else. And if they are, we should find out, do some investigating. How long have they been there? Are they ready for a change? And if not, we want to leave them there. We would, an example, if I were to make one here, it would be if I have found an individual who would be a perfect commissioner, who is with a new unit as a scoutmaster and has been serving there for maybe 12 months, and the unit is finally starting to click and be successful, the last thing I'd want to do is ask them to be a commissioner, distract them from that, and hurt that unit. That is something we want to avoid. So poaching, we definitely don't want to do that until we've done more homework. And there is a potential that if it's a scoutmaster that's been there 7, 8 years, or a committee member and they're ready for a change, then great. But we need to make sure to do that homework before we poach. So commissioner fit. As we as commissioners look for possible candidates, commissioner fit is an important consideration. And when there's a good fit with the unit and the commissioner that we're considering, the better the fit, the more likely that there will be a successful outcome. There's 5 things to consider when we look for commissioner fit with a unit. So once, what we've talked about in the past is the candidate. Now we're looking, how do they fit with the unit we're considering them for? So 1, strengths. As we look at strengths, we want to consider, what does the unit do well? It kind of relates to the potential that we talked about earlier, the potential of our candidate. If a unit does a great job at developing an annual budget and their program plan, then we can have a commissioner who maybe doesn't have experience in those areas work with that unit, and they'd be a great choice. But in a unit that perhaps struggles in those areas, we probably need to have a commissioner that has more experience that can help them out in that. So we look at the unit's strengths. What are the unit's needs? And so as we look at this, it's where does the unit need most support? And I'm kind of laughing, chuckling underneath my breath here a little bit, because we all have units where we could say, you ask the question, what does the unit need? And the first response comes to me is, what does the unit not need? We have units like that. And so then we need to dig deeper and find out, what do they need? What do they need the most? And then find a commissioner. We're looking for that fit again. And the needs of the unit ideally should fit the passion and capabilities of the of the commissioner candidate. Skills. So as we look at our unit, does the culture of the unit call for a unit commissioner with particularly strong communication skills, or do we need a commissioner that has a better ability to teach, coach, or plan? Is there a need? There's a unit in my district that has how do I put this? That has an aversion to. They've been doing things their way for a long time. And with the changes in the council and the chartering organization, I need a commissioner for that unit who can approach them in a way that they will accept him. Not any commissioner will be acceptable in that unit. And I found a great commissioner, and I had to look, and the commissioner that I found has been someone who has had experience in commissioning in California, in the southern US, as well as here in Utah, who's got that experience in traditional scouting that this unit finds acceptable and palatable. And so that's something, is this commissioner fit? I had to look, what commissioner will fit with this unit that they're not going to just reject outright. Another thing to consider is experience. What kind of experience in the unit's program, if this is a Cub Scout unit, maybe it's a sea ship or a venturing crew with this particular focus. As we're looking for the unit and the experience of this unit, what kind of experience does the commissioner have in this? Now, if we're looking for a commissioner for a Cub Scout unit, it isn't necessary all the time that a commissioner have prior experience in Cub Scouting, because there's training online to do that. But in some units, there may be a need for that experience for them to be able to help how to implement the program successfully. And it depends also on the leadership of the unit. Units that have strong leadership, we can have a commissioner who maybe doesn't have as much experience, but a unit who is struggling, if they're struggling to even have their committee meetings and they really don't know, they want to run a Cub Scout pack, but not exactly sure how to do it, then we need a commissioner who has some experience who can really help guide them. And then finally, the fit involves interaction. So how does the commissioner interact, and what does the unit need for interaction? Is email okay? Do they need face-to-face? I have a commissioner who is very much a face-to-face person and really doesn't do well in other methods of communication. And during COVID, that's been an interesting challenge to do that. So, and our units may need that. There are units who prefer, and unit leaders who prefer face-to-face over other methods of communication. So when we talk about all of these areas, all these key components of a commissioner fit, it's very likely that we will have a unit where a commissioner will fit and work very well, where they'll be able to serve effectively. And we'll want to, because things change, the way units interact as units grow and are strengthened and mature, as our commissioners improve and change, we should review commissioner assignments annually as administrative commissioners to make sure that the fit is still a good one, with the unit. And we do this annually, just asking if a commissioner is going to continue to be able to serve. And so at the same time, we want to look at, is the assignment still good? Is the number of units assigned to the commissioner still good? Is this commissioner still working? So that we can ensure that the maximum outcome of success for that unit and for the commissioner. So what do we do if the fit isn't working? And this is a group discussion. What do we do? Got a commissioner who, over the last year, things have changed. example of the commissioner who is very much a face-to-face commissioner, and COVID comes along. What do we do?
I think the example is quite well pictured. We try to pound a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
I think we try to look at some things. I mean, I for the crossroads of the West, and I, you'll have to speak for yourself, Rick. This has been a major change for us, and the pool of commissioners has changed considerably.
Yes.
And I don't know that we were doing the commissioner, putting commissioners in the right place. They were assigned based on their church assignments, but I think that's where we need to build towards, is building that pool of commissioners that we can pull from and meet the needs of the people, and don't try to pound a square peg into a round hole.
Yep. And David, that's as I think about it, when we first started, I was in the Elkhorn district, and then they said, "Oh, we're merging Elkhorn and Old Juniper, and we could become Mount Naomi district," and that changed all kinds of positions. And then 6 months later, it wasn't very long, and then, "Oh, we're going to merge the councils." And the major chartering organization in the area is no longer going to charter units. And so the churn was just incredible. And I, at the outset, as the district commissioner, they asked me to be for the Old Ephraim district. And I had people say, "I'm willing, I'd like to be a commissioner." And I'll tell you, first to start, I'm like, "Oh, you're willing?" That's all of this research were talked about the commissioner fit in the other. I know I've got a warm body.
That's exactly right.
We go here, we go there, and I got warm bodies in positions. And now I'm looking here a year later, I'm looking at, man, I've got some square pegs and round holes here.
Yeah.
And because it either culture there's a culture clash going on, or the commissioner just isn't. We talked about passion.
Yeah.
We don't have the passion anymore. That's one of the hard things we're struggling with is commissioners who were with the prior charting organization, and they like scouting, but it turns out they don't love scouting like they thought they did.
Yeah.
So anyway, we could probably talk the rest of the hour on that, David.
Hey, Vernon, where are you from? I've never met you before.
I'm on the other side of the country, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
So tell us how things work there. We're newbies in actual fact. So I think we're where you're at. We're trying to get to where you're at, I guess is what we're saying. How are you handling things?
Well, I have to confess, I'm an assistant council commissioner in my council. Also, I'm on the national service team for commissioners. And my new task is, how do we come up with a plan to recruit diverse commissioners?
Yeah.
So this is like kind of timely. So I've been crisscrossing the country on various virtual colleges. I think this may be my 13th or 14th college since last March. I've only been on the recruitment. I'm on the actual recruitment retainment committee for the national service team. I've only been there for about a month and a half, but I've taken this course these 7 times, and I get a different lens each time I do it. One of the things we're probably going to have to pay attention to is that we have major changes coming in sometime around July 1 that will affect every council in the country. A good bit of that will be diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. And that's going to be another added requirement as it relates to how do we select commissioners. Sure. So, for example, the team that I'm assigned to is to how do we go out and recruit commissioners of color, or different ethnic races. And basically we had three sub teams. So we had one team for African Americans. We had one team for Asian Americans. We had one team for Native Americans. We had one team for Latinos. And between 9 of us, we're trying to come up with a comprehensive plan on how to go about doing this. Now, your guys are a little bit unique. I've had one experience with the LDS, and basically what happened was in my district, I had 2 units, actually 3, but nobody wanted to be the commissioner on an LDS unit. Okay, so I'm like Mikey. They said, "Oh, we'll get Vernon to do it." And what it led to was sitting down with the stake president to talk about what the needs were. And he says, "I want my leaders trained like traditional leaders." Because in the LDS format, the stake president or the bishop of that church will walk into the room and says, "David, you're going to be the new scoutmaster for Troop 1010, and John, you're going to be the commissioner for X, Y, and Z." Meanwhile, John doesn't know have the slightest clue what a commissioner is, and David doesn't know the slightest on how to be a scoutmaster. So this particular stake president is Woodbatch trained, and he's a proponent that he wanted his churches to go the traditional way, not the LDS way.
Right.
So he asked me to put on a leadership course for 10 of his bishops.
Yeah.
And that was an experience, to say the least. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And to the point that I was able to see through a different lens as it relates to what they were up against in reference to scouting as a whole.
Yeah.
So it was an experience. I will never forget it.
Yeah.
Because my wife used to jig and pick at me because took the course. It took about 2 weeks to do because we had to do it in hourly increments.
Yeah.
And as you all know, we can't do things on Sunday.
Yeah.
Actually, we had to get special dispensation just to do the one activity on Saturday.
Yeah.
So my wife says, "Well, don't come back converted." I said, "Well, that's all right. They all believe in this. They all believe in Jesus Christ. So that's the common denominator right there."
Yes.
And so I told the stake president. He said, "Anytime you want to come on over, you just come on over. No problem."
Oh, that's good. No, that's the big change for us is since the LDS Church is no longer engaged in it,
right?
That direction is not coming through the stake presidents, and which is actually in a lot of ways good. It's just the fact is we had such a strong tradition, over 100 years of strong tradition, and now
it went away.
We're doing a different way, and it's taken a new turn in our lives.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to get a little bizarre because somewhere around, I guess, June, July 1, we go from our areas into territories, and that's where it's going to get really kind of crazy. Because I was looking at the map, and you guys sitting in probably one of the largest territories in the entire system.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sitting there going that, and we were talking about that in our last meeting, and we're saying, "Oh man, that's going to be bizarre." So I don't know. I still don't know how they're going to do that. It's the same thing on our side of the country. I was pegged to do the diversity equity lead, and I turned it down. And I said, only for the simple fact, I said, no one's sat down and explained to me what's being required other than, you're checking a box or you're checking off your list. And I says, it's not whereas, I just walked into scouting 2 years ago, and I'm going to say, yeah. And actually, this is the first time I actually turned something down in scouting in my short 28-year career.
Wow.
But I said, when we get this straightened out, I'm all in. I'll be your diversity champion for the council. If I got to go across the country to work with a council, whether it be virtual or possible physical appearance, fine. But you got to define it as opposed to what you're doing. I mean, if they got a merit badge coming online, which is supposed to happen after July. Then it becomes mandatory in 2022. And we still don't know the guidelines to that.
Yeah.
So, there's so many things out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Rick, you better go on and finish your stuff.
Yeah.
Before you get hijacked.
No, it's a great conversation, and it's some of the challenges we face. You mentioned diversity, and I'm out here, with the still, even though the LDS Church no longer participates as a chartering organization, well over 50% of our candidates are still in that faith, and there's a whole conflict there. And I look at diversity and how can I reach further out to women and others to participate. That's an ongoing challenge, especially in an area where that hasn't been the case for so long, and it's really hard to get across that message to tell people, hey, we want you. So yeah, great, good stuff to look for. So basically in this slide, if it doesn't fit, don't force it. We need, if a commissioner and a unit don't fit, or maybe they did but now they don't, we need to be cognizant of that and move them. And so I'm looking at that. If I've got places where I've got warm bodies right now, since we're doing our charter for the council and the districts, I'm looking around at the individuals and saying, okay, who do I need to move, and what do I need to adjust to become successful and help the units out? Okay, when do we recruit? We're not gonna spend a ton of time here. We could talk about when's the best time to recruit, fall roundups, other things, but basically all the time. We're continually looking for individuals. Where can we find them? They can come out of units, they can come out of chartered organizations, the NESA, OA, others. There's all kinds of areas where we can find commissioners. Not just in our district committee meetings or others. Now that's the first stop in district committee. Hey, does anyone know of commissioners? But we need to look further than that for potential candidates. Remembering, of course, the 5 Ps that go into this: preparation, passion, potential, priorities, and poaching, as in not to poach. All right. So how do we do it? If we're making the ask, we work as a team to prepare, we make an appointment and making that ask. So once we found who, and we've talked about it here, we've gone through these various areas, we've looked at it and said, where can we find them? Who is it going to be? We've identified based on their priorities, their potential, their passions, then we're going to ask. Now there's a template that we use to make the ask, and I wanted to show that really quick. Let's see, that's this guy. Asking for servant leadership. So this lays it out in a structured format. The team lead, team members, who the candidate is, and the role that we're going to ask. You know what, I'm going to actually show there's a sample one here. I'm going to show it. So this form lays out very much and understands. Vernon talked about, that when he turned down, it's like, no one told me what I was supposed to do. And so, we set our commissioners up for failure if we don't tell them what that is. So here we say Joanna is the candidate. We're asking her to be a new unit commissioner. And then really key, this definition of success. How do we define she's going to be successful? Or a new commissioner is going to be successful. This is what we expect, kind of what this is. I love this time commitment. If we're talking to people, we don't want to say, oh, it doesn't take very long, and you get into it and you're like, whoa, this is way more time than I ever expected. We tend to think in, oh, you're just going to go visit the unit once or twice a month. And we totally forget. But you need to go to roundtable, and you need to go to get your commissioner basic training, and we've got commissioner staff meeting every month, and and pretty soon we can overwhelm a candidate. This way, if we've written it down, I love how this outlined. Here's what we're expecting every month, why we think they're a good candidate, and then next, what do we expect if they say yes? What are the next steps that we need them to take? This form is a great form to use. When after we've identified candidates, we've gone through rosters or to the OA, or we've received candidates in through Commissioner Tools, this form will help us be successful as we make the ask. There's a blank form, and I'm going to give the link to it here in just actually, I'm going to just drop it right now. So this link I'm going to drop into the chat. We got 2 minutes to finish. That link is actually will take you to the zip file that contains all the information for this course. It has this sample ask form. It has the other ask form that I talked about. It actually includes this friendstorming manual. This course doesn't really get much into friendstorming other than mentioning it, but it does have this as something, as a resource for you to use, as well as an outline. And let's just do this here in the next 82 seconds we have, about developing a commissioner prospect list. Roster reviews is a great, it takes some time. A roster review, that's like a 3-4 hour process. But we identify the need, and how do we do it? We meet with key leaders, the district commissioner, the executive, assistant district commissioners, and we printouts of the unit rosters over the last several years. And as we go through the rosters, we identify people who stay with the units, people who have experience, people who have youth involved in the program. And we're pulling out all this to identify potential candidates that we can go ask. I don't have time to go through all these steps and talk about them, but it is a very good outline of how to approach people and invite them to participate in scouting with us. And then what they, after the answer, no, yes, or maybe, what do? We need to know. If they say yes, we let them know what to do. If they say no or maybe, we keep and ask if we can approach later. Okay. And this is going to close out in 10 seconds. So I think we've talked. Thank you so much for your participation.